next edition of Nostr News. It's been a while.
It has been too long.
Welcome.
I'm excited to be back. I know we're only here, overlapping in person for a minute, so I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah. I'm glad you could swing by just on a beautiful June day in San Francisco where it's cloudy and foggy.
Well, it's been cloudy and foggy for like a week now, and I was telling you, to any listener, I had a bit of a cold last week, and my voice is still recovering, and so for that whole week, I was both like a little tired and out of it myself, and it was also like super dreary and foggy in SF. So today, I finally feel like we're back.
Oh, this is the back. Okay,
this is the back. Yeah, no, dude. I mean, the last week was just fog, and anyways.
Yeah.
Having said all that, my friend Gabby, who lives in Monterrey in Mexico, she was telling me that it got to 117 Fahrenheit there.
Ooh.
And I've heard in Texas it's like similar. So, even on our dreary days, like I'll take it. Yeah.
Right on. And so it's been about a month.
It's been about a month. And I mean, dude, I want to hear from you first. Like I've been chilling in SF doing some stuff. You've been hiking in the Himalayas. Like what? Yeah, give me the lowdown. What was that like?
Yeah.
The highest Nostr ever?
I was trying to write the highest note ever because I don't know that anybody's really.
How much THC was that? I'm pretty sure there are some people that might have you beat.
There's some people that may have me beat on the THC note writing. I was thinking about the elevation.
Gotcha.
The elevation so we were in India. We flew into Delhi, but went up to this area called Ladakh that it's not quite as well known, but it's kind of in the Himalayas part of India, and we went. It's about 11,500 feet. So what's that? 4,200 meters or something. And many of the days we were sleeping at like 5,000 meters or 15,000 feet or so. So it was really, really high. Like getting headaches when you sleep, and you sort of have to acclimatize to it. But it was just, gorgeous, huge lakes and huge, big skies, big mountains everywhere, big passes. And we're just in the middle of nowhere. So there's like basically no mobile reception. So I was trying to write the highest note ever, at least so far. And the internet just wasn't present. So I've got some good pics from it. So maybe I'll post some of those and tag them highest.
What was it like? I mean, just to have that time offline, like, do you feel like your brain reset? Do you feel like healthier, more present? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely causes you, if you sort of go on these kinds of trips, it causes you to focus on the present because there's always a set of like, what are just my root problems that I need to solve today? Like I need to get up and get my face splashed in the river, or I need to get a warm drink to warm up, or I need to get, we woke up one morning and it just like snowed 6 inches. There was not supposed to be any snow. And I like bang on the side of the tent and like a sheet of snow falls off. And I didn't even like, what is that? It was so weird. And I zip open the tent and there's like, 6 inches of snow. So we had to hike up over a pass in snow. We didn't have the right snow gear. Those kinds of things like really focus you on the present in a way that, it's really hard to do when you have internet connected life and most of your life is kind of, kind of networked like that. So it is a nice kind of, reset, removal, return to kind of a different time. I was talking to Jen. I said, I don't think I've been this disconnected from the internet in 30 years, since I kind of really got active on the internet. So,
and how long was that without any internet?
I think it was about 7 days of like, we were about 9-10 days total trekking, but we had a little interlude of internet in the middle, like at the early middle of that.
Did you notice any other differences in just like how you feel like were colors brighter, or like sounds louder?
Oh, I mean, everything was different because the elevation was so dramatic that it was like, it was headaches and everything felt like a foggy dream. We were, still a little bit adjusted on the jet lag. So the jet lag, the elevation, the different eating schedule, everything is different. And it kind of feels like a fog in a sense. Like it's almost hard to remember each of the moment to moments because the thing is like a dream.
Yeah.
But it was really fun. And, we got to hang out with all these people who just, grew up there and they sort of work helping people through these kinds of treks. We kind of met a lot of people along the road and homestays. And
really?
Yeah.
You like stayed with just random families?
Yeah, well, there's families who kind of have a business of setting up a homestay. It's almost like Airbnb without a website.
Oh, nice, I like it.
But they cook.
Do they take sats?
They didn't. Well, they don't have really good network connection there. So there's one picture that Jen tweeted of me looking for like all the villagers claim that, oh, well, there's like this internet signal that you can connect to in this one corner of the village. We wandered off there and we were like, okay, it's information superhighway or chilling with yaks.
Yeah.
And so we wandered
Yaks
over there.
it
Turned out to be yaks. Yeah. The spoiler alert. But yeah, I just getting to see people like in the homestay, there were some of the family there were really big into like this one YouTuber who was doing kind of like Korean drama narrative podcast stuff on YouTube, which kind of like surprised us. And they had like K-pop stickers on their phones, but they're in like a crazy remote rural village. Like there's nothing around. So we were impressed by how kind of those aspects of pop culture and the internet did have their influence and did make their way to these pretty remote areas.
Cool. What was the most surprising thing from the trip?
The most surprising is, do you know what Cambly is?
No.
Cambly is this company a couple of friends of mine started, which is designed to help people who are learning English as a second language improve their language skills by being able to just sort of like talk to a native speaker on demand. So you just open up the app, push a button, you're talking to somebody who natively speaks English, and that helps you up-level your English, your accent, your vocabulary, etc. And we were talking about, our guide on this trek was asking us what we do back in the States or whatever. And I was trying to describe the set.
How long you got, dude?
The set of activities. And one of the things is, we're kind of involved with sort of the high tech industry. And, he asked about what that is. And I was telling him about startups and I told him about Cambly. He's like, oh, Cambly. He's like, Cambly, like I have that on my phone.
Really?
It's totally remote guide, totally disconnected from the internet. And he opened up his phone, swipes, and he's got the Cambly app right there. He's like, oh yeah, this is how we practice English.
That's crazy.
And
Did you tell your friend?
I haven't yet. I need to
That's super cool. I'm sure he'll be like thrilled.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, because it's like
wild,
way in the middle of nowhere. And I knew these guys when they started. It was like out of my office that I was working in. So it was kind of like fun. And we actually worked together for many years. So I know these guys really well, and just always think of, oh, that's Samir and Kevin. That's their thing in their company. But I didn't see it as global as it is. Like it's
crazy.
Cool to see it, kind of grow up from an office that I shared with them to seeing it now on the
badass, man.
Already on the phone of somebody else.
That's the beauty of the internet, right?
Yeah. It's really
super cool. Actually two kind of random questions, just my own personal interest. I've actually been discussing it. I know my girlfriend is very interested in doing a Himalayan trip one day. So two things I'm thinking about. Number one, I've heard the flights are super rough. Like, was it super scary, just like turbulence wise, getting into these mountains, or like you take any of those tiny prop planes, or what is that like?
So where we flew in the India side of the Himalayas is a town called Leh, has a pretty big airport. I mean, not huge, but like a small regional, but not like a single landing strip, or you're not like on an aircraft carrier or something.
You got like a jet. It's not like a prop plane. Okay.
Yeah. So, it's a smallish plane, and the mountains are real, and there's some turbulence from the way the wind hits the mountains. But I wouldn't describe it as like among the more harrowing flights I've been on.
Got it. Okay.
The smaller the plane and the more mountains, usually the more harrowing it feels. I've had my stomach drop a lot, and that didn't really happen here.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. Second thing, did you get to do interact with any of the like monk communities at all, or any of the classical Buddhist communities?
Yeah, basically every place we went had a monastery.
Wow.
And you could just go to the monasteries, and you can tour around, you walk around,
Could you stay there if you wanted to?
I would bet there's a way to do that. We didn't really look into that, but I would bet that you could do that.
Cool.
But there's lots of monasteries all over. We actually hired a driver to take us around to all the monasteries around Ladakh.
Cool.
One day before we started the trek. And, there's these really big, like there's one that was like, I think in it was either a Nepalese or Tibetan style building. And some of the other ones are more like local style buildings. And we must have gone to half a dozen monasteries.
Cool.
And, there's real monks live there and pray there. And, we got sort of, you want to be respectful and not get in the way of their stuff. But then there's also, plenty of space to do that, to kind of wander around and get to see what it's like without being really intrusive. So yeah.
Did you see that meme that blew up a couple days ago? I don't know if it was AI generated or not, but the monks that are like they're like, making music on the top of the mountain. Like, it looks like they're basically DJing a big party.
Oh no.
That's pretty cool.
I didn't see that.
I was wondering if you were there at that party.
I've been disconnected from internet culture too long.
Dude, sounds really healthy. The proverbial touch mountain.
Yes, touch mountain. So we touched mountain. And so while I've been gone, I know you guys did a Shack 15 event here.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I unfortunately didn't get to attend, but I guess, yeah, tell me about that. How did that go?
It was cool. I mean, so we'll talk more about this later, but a lot of my focus in the last month, I've obviously been following Nostr, but a little bit, shifted gears. Well, some like fun operational stuff and law stuff, which is its own fun challenge. But beyond that, I've just been really interested in a lot of the open source AI stuff. And I know we'll talk a lot more about that. Mm-hmm. And I published this thesis, which is basically that open source AI needs both Nostr and Lightning to go really big. And we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. But that was one of the things we covered at this event. The event was organized by Jacob from Lightning Labs. He did a great job. He had a bunch of folks come up. Elise and her colleague, Vikash from Stillmark, another Lightning Bitcoin type fund. We had Paul from Stackwork, who's doing some, some interesting AI and Lightning stuff. We had, just like a good group of folks. And then a number of folks, like I met a couple of like kind of just open source AI curious people that knew very little about Lightning and Nostr. And I think that was the coolest, was starting to see that seed get planted. And, we traded contact info with a couple of them. And that's like, it was a really good start to all of this. I think there's a lot more we can do, and I think we will do. And I know there's one other big event coming up soon in SF. I want to get way more involved, maybe in the fall, and throwing more of these, hackathons and trying to build that bridge between Lightning and Nostr and the open source AI community. I fundamentally believe they need each other. Yep. And it was cool to me to start seeing, some people's eyes light up. One example actually was not that event, but the week before, maybe, or 2 weeks before, I went to an event at this this thing in Fort Mason. You told me about Founders Inc. or something.
Oh yeah. And
it was pretty cool. They had like a kind of like generative agent something day. And I met these guys that were working on something called GP Team. And they were these two kids that came up from LA that were not doing AI stuff like a month ago. And then they did. And this project started popping a little bit. And basically they used some paper from Stanford. And, you could do some kind of like agent simulation, multi-agent simulation. And they were talking about the stuff that you do. And I was like, hey guys, wouldn't it be interesting if you could do economic simulations and give these dudes Lightning wallets? And their eyes just lit up like they didn't even know that was possible. And so a big part of this event that we did at Shack 15 was Roast Beef, the CTO of Lightning Labs, Lalu. He dropped on GitHub the first code to like give LangChain agents Lightning wallets. And so that hasn't been pushed hard yet. I think this next event, and hopefully others that I want to help organize in the future, that's like the theme I want to focus on, is how do you put up Lightning Gateway for people running the models that want to get inferences, and how do you get the actual agents, wallets themselves, to interact with Lightning Labs' L402 protocol, which of course goes back to the internet 402 error code, payment not received or whatever. Right. And I fundamentally believe, and I think there's a lot of sort of Nostr overlay as well, which we'll talk more about, but I just think that insight is going to be massive. And I'm starting to see, like, when people, like the AI kids, start to get it, their eyes just light up.
Yeah. And so this is like a LangChain agent. So somebody writes an independent LangChain agent. And is this like a bridge that Lalu built to help?
So Lalu built two things, or really multiple things. And it was Lalu and Cody originally at this hackathon. Cody's done a lot of, who's now, I think, head of developer stuff at Fedi. He's done a lot on this front. The first thing that Lalu released over a year, maybe it was 2 years ago, it was called then the LSAT protocol, and now renamed L402 protocol. And the idea was just an easy way to payment gate APIs. So any API, you have to pay Satoshis per gigabyte of data or per whatever action. But no one was really using that. There wasn't really a use case. And then in this hackathon, they basically gave LangChain agents the concept of having a wallet, and they could use that wallet to make payment requests or like data requests from various APIs and offer payment for that. So basically it's like a way for a LangChain agent to have a concept of a wallet that can interact with the L402 protocol for whatever API.
And so do you start at Lightning Labs, if you want to build an agent like this, and then they have some sort of wrapper that helps you wrap your LangChain agent in that wallet infrastructure?
That's right. And he just dropped, the little code snippets on GitHub and Jupyter Notebook that you can play within this. So you have to like basically install LangChain and all those various dependencies first, and then you can use this wrapper.
Oh, nice.
It's sick.
And so it's live. You can start doing this
right now.
And what are people doing with it?
No one's done anything yet. This event was like the first time. So they demoed a concept of it at the last Craft Replit hackathon. And from what I understand, Amjad really liked it. This guy, McKay, who I've been following, has got a lot of open source, whatever AI people. He seems like he's getting lightning pill and talking more about it now. So a couple of those guys got it, but no one's really done anything to play with it yet. And I think Lalu dropped the code just so we could have it for this event to talk about.
I see.
The next step is like, basically it's like the BD with the AI kits. And that's what I want to help on next is
nice.
if you can just, I think there's another hackathon that's brewing that I can't say too much about right now, but I think that's going to be a big one. I want to do more of these at DZ. But basically, like, I think it's just an education issue at this point. Code's there. You sit down, any kid, and I think if you get the lane chain community, the replicate community, those are probably the two most important ones. Right. And just be aware that this is possible. Yeah. I think they're going to go to
even just like if you had like one really compelling demo app, then I think it would really get people's creative juices flowing because people may not even be connecting the dots between all the different kind of domains that this touches.
Exactly. And I think probably the two easiest demos are not, well, one, Danny already has one of these up on the DZ website, which is just a wrapper for ChatGPT. And so the idea is you pay sats to access the ChatGPT wrapper. And, you know, that's a big deal potentially for two reasons. One, from what I've heard, OpenAI is denying a lot of credit cards because of the chargeback and fraud risks. That's a very real thing, right? Like it's cents on the order of cents per inference for them. And so if you're putting in a credit card and they, you know, you run up $100,000 million bill and then you do a chargeback, they can't do that. And so I think that's a really interesting potential first use case. And then also just opening that up, like I was, you know, telling you and Jen earlier, like if you're a kid in India and you don't have a credit card, you just can't access the API. There's just no way, right? But if you have access to a Lightning enabled app, right, and you want to pay on the order of 1 penny per call, that's a whole new market. So, you know, I'd say that's probably the most effective first piece. Or you could even do like GPT for all, a Lalu demo that you can run that on your own computer and put up like a SATS, you know, barrier. Like, okay, I need to pay Satoshis, like a vending machine to use this. But yeah, we probably need a more like production ready, like clear first use case.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's close.
And is that the event that you're alluding to, is that going to be more hackathon oriented or more kind of content to share, kind of get these ideas stirring?
It's going to be more hackathon oriented, but I hope there will be more demos ready for that.
Cool. Yeah, I think so much of it, if you give people a space to like brainstorm and just try something and almost like a stage to demo on, it kind of gets the creative juices flowing because people want to kind of show something cool off.
That's what and again, I'm not organizing this, so I can't say too much more about it other than I am committing to support it in various ways, and as are other people. And so I think there will be some like actual like prize money. Like it's not going to be like, you know, nothing.
Yeah.
And so I hope that's enough to kind of get some excitement. But even if it's not, I would like to do more of these, you know, with, you know, you and the DZ community and like whoever else out here. Like, I just believe we're like this close. Like it's like just connecting that last dot, and that's what makes it go for Lightning.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. I think there's a nice overlap kind of between the stuff, you know, the stuff happening in Lightning and Nostr and AI. Yeah. And so can we find, you know, something that sort of starts to inspire the use cases or kind of more hacking? Did you talk to Danny at all about the how are the NFT projects going? Is he still active? NosFT, is it, right?
Yeah, and there's so much happening there, dude. Like I don't know how much I can share on that front either. Okay. But on the way over here, I was running a little late today because I ran into his team on the street. We're neighbors, and they have a couple of operations while you were gone. You know, they were minting their own inscriptions, which are like NFTs on Bitcoin. And then they have the Nos NFT website, which is in a wallet, which they integrate with Alby, and you know it's Nostr based backend for this marketplace. I think that's really promising for Nostr as well. They also have now a Sats dispenser, and so this is an idea we've been talking about for a while, which I find crazy, but I knew there was demand for it because I had various people asking me for it. People that want to buy rare Sats or like uncommon Sats, and so they have a website where they're essentially have an industrial mining operation mining for the rarest Sats and selling them. And you know, I can't get into all the numbers, but I can say it's wild. The business is booming.
And that means that's if you happen to own something like an ordinal that people turn out to care about, but you don't even participate in that ecosystem. You don't even know what you own.
That's right.
So they can they message you somehow, or how do they?
They're not doing that. There are open source tools. I don't know if they built that or someone else did, but they have, you know, their own proprietary like mining operation where they get access to lots of Sats, find them, and sell them.
Wow.
Pretty
cool.
Business is booming. It's crazy.
Yeah, the one thing I love about about kind of Danny's approach is he will just like do some random crazy hack thing that's super relevant. It didn't exist last week. It's super relevant right now. And then it kind of blows up and people are like, oh, that's cool.
Danny's a G. Like he's one of the few hackers that's like a 100x engineer. Like he's just really fucking good.
Yeah.
Has a business sense. Like he can smell where the business is going, but also his taste. Like the stuff they're doing, like I find it silly, but it's like, it's pretty cool. I mean, like they're not like, they have like really good artists on staff now. Like they're not messing around.
Yeah.
That DZ to the moon, baby. To the motherfucking moon.
Very good. And so what else? I know we've got a list of some things we're going to look at, but what else kind of is top of mind, kind of in just kind of Nostr focused ecosystem? Because I'm thinking, I mean, the last month I have been very disconnected, but I did notice obviously like the Apple Damus thing looks like it's a little bit of a struggle.
Well, let's talk. I mean, I think we have two things. Maybe before we jump in the Apple Damus thing, I think that's probably the biggest story to discuss. And like I don't have a particularly hot take. I think it's frustrating, but we'll get there. I would say so. Nostr had pre-December last year, just like very small, 7,000 people even knew what it is really, and it's a very insular community. Mid-December it pops, Jack does his thing, gets everyone excited about it. You get a lot of builders coming in, and we saw that kind of just like meteoric rise, right? Yeah. And we don't know how many people there are total, but we know it's on the order of hundreds of thousands that at least played with it in some way, shape, or form. Tens of thousands that were using it weekly. And I think the reality is, from what I'm seeing and hearing and the numbers on Nostr.ban and everything, it does appear things are stagnating right now. Now, I'm curious to get your take on all of that. I think there's a variety of reasons for this. It could be as simple as, there's a new wave of clients that we know are coming that are going to be, faster and better caching, little things like that. It could be that we need this new wave of new kinds of activities, whether it's a back-end Nostr back-end marketplace for sats or digital goods or local Bitcoins. All of these different things are coming, and it's great. You've got the new use cases like Highlighter and some of the music stuff like what Stemster and Wavelake are working on, all very cool. And maybe we need one of those to make it pop. And I do think that in general, you don't see something go totally vertical, right? You see it go vertical, stagnate a little bit. You might even regress a little bit. Building, the next thing pops. But every time, kind of like the Bitcoin price, it's like the new high, the new low is always much higher than the former high.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening here. But I do think it's good to take a moment and pause and just reflect on like, what is going on? What is going to be that next pop? Like, have any of our priors, been wrong or anything like that?
Right.
I don't think so. I do think that all of the reasons that I love Nostr being simple, easy to build on, blah, 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 like none of that has changed. And so my hunch is we're just in one of those plateaus before either the better clients or just the new use cases pop it. But yeah, I don't know. What is your take?
Yeah, I would say I generally agree with that. And this was actually a specific question from somebody who had asked, do you know Mutinous 11?
No. Mutinous. Yeah, that I don't know him.
He interacts a bunch on YouTube, but he had asked, devil's advocate. He wanted me to ask you, what could be wrong about your thesis on Bitcoin and Nostr, right? And so he wanted to hear kind of just some open-ended discussion about that. And I think you're kind of touching on that, so I just wanted to raise that kind of the themes are relevant here. I still find the architecture of Nostr as compelling as ever. So there's nothing about it that sort of gives me pause. I think it's sort of, there's lots of problems to be solved still, but from an architecture, I think it makes sense. It's the best I've seen. It's hard to imagine something that's so much, better along one axis. So I think it's more like a process of iteration to get this thing to do more and to be more useful to more people. But I do think like one of the things that may be holding the broader ecosystem back is that, we have kind of enough usage in the Twitter client, like, Twitter clone style use case. And I mean, I love that kind of stuff. I use that stuff every day.
Yeah, it's cool.
And it's kind of our own water cooler for people who are kind of purple pilled to gather. It's a place for us to gather and talk and learn and see what's going on. But I don't know that use case alone is going to be the one that gets the next wave of people on. So I kind of agree with your, like, the new lows are going to be higher than the previous highs. In that kind of characteristic, I would expect we see. But where is the next, external kind of impulse going to come from? And I think it is more likely to come from new behaviors than it is from like more of the kind of existing behaviors getting better.
Yeah, I agree.
And so
with that.
I do think the existing behaviors should get better. And I see lots of great work. I mean, obviously Damus is doing a lot of great work there. Primal's doing a lot of great work, Coracle and Snort and all of the core clients, I think, are making substantial progress and improving, the core kind of Twitter client experience. But I think to really unlock a new wave, I think there needs to be something that's maybe it's a new use case or a new behavior that grows up around these tools and this kind of protocol. And, the one that I'm, most attuned to right now is kind of the subreddit use case.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, Reddit has kind of, really
screwed the pooch here.
Yeah, screwed the pooch, if you want to say. But they, I think they've really abused their position. And I think the structure of the, because they're a centralized provider, they feel like they can get away with that because, people will come back. But because a centralized provider and because of the structure of it, it's kind of like you only need a certain number, few dozen people on a given subreddit for everybody to get value from that subreddit.
Right.
And I think that's pretty different than Twitter. Like in Twitter, you kind of need to be able to connect with everybody and everybody needs to be generating content or their account is basically dead to you. Like it doesn't really matter. But if you have we see this in Stacker News, you can actually build Stacker News outside of Reddit and it can be a thriving community on its own. Yeah. Hacker News is a thriving community, same structure as Reddit, but it's a different community, different set of people sharing different kind of content. And I think it kind of points to the fact that you don't really need the whole world assembled there to make a subreddit work well. You can actually just have probably a few dozen people would be enough. A few dozen really active people.
They're good power users, yeah.
Yeah. And so and I haven't really seen anybody build something like this, but I think it would be compelling if somebody built, kind of imagine it to be like as slick and simple as like the very best Nostr client experience you've seen where you just show up and say go and then you're in it. You don't have to get too involved in the private key management and you don't have to think too much about that. It just kind of works.
Yeah.
And now you're in a community that otherwise may not be acceptable on Reddit these days or that has kind of the moderation problems. So I was actually, I recorded a podcast this morning with Hodlbod, John from Coracle.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to catch back up with him. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So he was really getting into this idea too. So
cool.
I'll publish that soon. But I think there's something there where it's like, somewhat relay driven, kind of relay as an aggregation point for a topic or almost like a subreddit or what he was calling a magazine. And you could have like a client that pulls from that, but you could have multiple different clients, multiple different algorithms, multiple different perspectives on that same kind of content. So you actually get sort of the algorithmic and community organization of a subreddit without any of the censorship or kind of overhead authority. You get different tastes mixed in, different algorithms mixed in.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, and I know you've raised this question with Kian as well, and I know he's cooking something up. So I know he's kind of like the mad genius when he drops. Yeah. I'm sure it'll be fucking awesome. And who knows, maybe it will be, him again. For what it's worth, as just like a quick aside here, even outside of Nostr, I have to say, I think Stacker News is getting better and better. Mm-hmm. I don't know if every day I've just been impressed with he's been focused lately, or he's made this recent hire. Guys has done a lot of the work on that. And they've expanded beyond just Bitcoin. They went to Bitcoin and Nostr and then a meta subreddit, now general tech. And I'm been really, really pleasantly surprised. The quality, and honestly, I've always been more of a Reddit. I've learned more from Reddit than I have from Twitter. I like Twitter. Twitter's amazing, and I find hidden gems there. But Reddit, I would say, is probably the most useful resource I've ever had. And by the way, as just an aside, this goes back to my my article last summer, How to Disrupt Google. And the thesis was that Google sucks without Reddit. Google is just a front end for Reddit. And it's funny because I saw that over and over the last couple of weeks, everyone on Twitter being like, when Reddit goes down, Google is useless. I think that's true. Yeah. Reddit is so much more valuable than they realize. Right. And so I think that what I love about that, and to your point, what I see in Stacker News is you don't need everybody posting. If you've got, a couple dozen really smart, high quality, committed people that are there every day, I get real value out of that because it's not also like hot takes. It's like thoughtful, long pieces.
Yep.
And so, however that ends up blending in with Nostr, I'm really impressed with the direction Stacker News is going. I really hope that somehow can, come in and become interoperable.
Yep.
But I agree. I would love if there's other people listening that are experimenting with this idea. I think Reddit on Nostr, now is the time. You know, I think it's also a really good time BD wise to go to some of these other Reddit forum moderators and be like, now you understand it's not yours.
Yep.
If you come to Nostr, it's yours.
Yep. Totally agree.
That's a pretty compelling use case. And again, it's not like you have to convince everyone. You go to, whatever, a small handful of subs, you have to convince 1 or 2 or 3 people. It seems doable.
Yep. And I guess like convincing people to try a Reddit or a subreddit solution on Nostr, it almost feels like it's kind of weighty to even explain that without some sort of a reference implementation or example.
You build your own first.
Kind of need, I think, we need a piece of software that works really well. And there's probably some to do, at least the version of how we would imagine doing a subreddit. At least maybe this was my imagination, but I think it needs a little bit of metadata, which might be protocol upgradey.
What sort of metadata?
Well, like I would imagine that you don't submit just to the subreddit, but that you actually are composing a note.
Yeah, it's a note, sure.
It's a Nostr note, but that you have to kind of indicate which community or subreddit or magazine you would want it to be submitted to as part of the new. And then it would be part of that filter that could then be upvoted by people.
Got it.
But we don't really know, like, is there a way to pull that together, like all those submissions to pull together, algorithmically rank without that metadata being explicit? I think it doesn't work unless there's that metadata explicit, but I don't know. I haven't thought so much about the data structure.
I mean, you certainly wouldn't want it to be exclusive. Like any client should be able to surface if they want, obviously. But to your point,
but do you need a kind for it, or do you need an upgrade, a metadata upgrade to
Keon,
kind, or
Artur, Pablo? If you guys are listening,
right? Because they're not busy.
I know exactly. I know you got nothing else on your plate. It's a good question. I don't know.
But I think nobody's going to move to it until we have a piece of software that people can play with. And Hodlbod was mentioning one called Zappdet, Zappdet or something. So it's, I think, a high level attempt, but I don't know how many of the details has sorted out. And I've discussed with Kian a little bit, and I think he's cautious about how you can build an effective client like that while keeping it decentralized, because it has it requires an algorithm. Like Twitter can operate with no algorithm, but a subreddit can't really operate without an algorithm. And so I think he's a bit cautious on, getting into that. At least it was a long time ago when I chatted with him about it, maybe a month ago, but so I don't know how his thinking may have changed.
Can't you have like the algorithm be a different layer, like you talked about, like maybe the subreddit or the Reddit piece of software chooses one out of the box, but there's like a setting where you could go and say, actually, and this kind of goes back to Artur's idea, where you can turn everything into like, I forgot what he calls it, but Nostr app, whatever.
Yeah.
Where every app can be value ranked or whatever as well. And so maybe the algorithms could just be value ranked and say, actually, just like plop this one in.
I mean, I find that compelling. I've been pointing to the example of, the popular feed, the relay that, the popular relay that...
Is that one of Artur's?
Artur has?
Yeah.
So I think that's like a great example of like an algorithm. I could point to it when I want to. I can switch it off. But you could imagine a whole switchable thing like that that's super flexible. And
this brings a couple of things. I mean, like one, I personally am of the opinion or of the vision. Like I like that something like Primal, by the way, just has an opinion. It's just their algorithm is there.
Yeah.
I also think you should be able to go in the settings and change that. Like I think both are beautiful. Like be opinionated and cool. If you want to try something else, there's a way to do that. Or, I think I was listening to a podcast with Fia Jaff or don't. Or just if you don't like my opinion, download a different piece of software. Like go for it. But I do think, my kind of like first take on this would be take an opinion on what you think is the best algorithm, somehow, link to someone else's like Artur's like marketplace for algorithms. Now, this gets me to a separate point where I think if I'm thinking of all the different kinds of next apps that can make Nostr pop, one of these ideas I've seen from many different angles is this idea of like, collaborating together to create some piece of work and then splitting revenues among all the collaborators.
Right.
I think this could work for, I know this is kind of, some of the music ideas are coming out with Nostr and Wavelake, which is really cool. I know this could be done with some of the writing and highlighting stuff from Pablo. This could be done with coding and open source projects in general, but it also could be done for any of these new projects. Like imagine you're basically like, cool, I've got this Reddit clone and we're going to give 10 or 20% cut of all profits to whatever algorithm people use. And, we encourage people to build an algorithm that's compatible with us because we're going to pay you to do that or whatever. And like, maybe that becomes the standard.
Right.
I think there could be something magic in that. Like if you bring everyone in together to make a bigger pie and just like share,
Yep.
I think that's a magical activity that has never been possible
Yep.
in software, in art, anywhere.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think, some of the details come down to like, what are you creating and how do you sort of help the creators manage the discussion of how value should be shared, and is value only shared among the creators or also some of the infrastructure layers, and how do all the cuts work? Like it gets to be a bit of mental tax.
Yeah. But I think that should be abstracted from the user, right? Like, I mean, maybe again, there's like settings for the super users that can go and play with this stuff. But I think like an out of the box, like imagine you're just on Reddit and it's like Stacker News. Like I think they take 10%, right?
Right.
Or whatever it is. Cool. But instead of that 10% going only to Stacker News, it's like, whoever builds it can just choose what they want and then people can go and play with it if they want.
Right.
But like, it's like, okay, of that 10%, 10% of the 10%. So 1% goes to the algorithm, 1% goes to the relay,
Right.
1% goes to the whatever. I don't know. I think it'd be but I think the key insight there is if you can just like kind of like value for value split payments and get people to buy in, because then that has the beauty of aligned incentives. Everyone's pushing in the same direction because the bigger the pie, we all win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a compelling model, and I think we just need to figure out what are the right kind of early use cases where like it's simple enough that it just kind of like it has enough momentum that then people start to do all the diversity of options.
Totally. And maybe it's art, maybe podcast already has momentum there. Music, I can see it very easily for.
Right. Yeah, podcast seems like a very natural place where there's already a lot of experimentation like this.
Yeah.
But you did all the work on this, on all of our curation for links today, so I guess you need the 90%.
Well, you've done like all of the work on the podcast forever, so I'm happy to step up a little bit.
But I guess we have to be modifying our splits on a per on a per production episode.
But just to kind of take that point a little bit further, it's funny because in a way, this is what the shitcoins wanted to do. Mm-hmm. It's like, what is equity? It's a claim on future cash flows. What is this? You're distributing cash flows.
Yeah. So
it's like, once again, you can do everything with Bitcoin and Lightning, including the incentivization, which is just split cash flows.
Yeah, totally. And there's nuggets of greatness in many failed ideas or ideas that maybe we may not consider ethically aligned, but that still, we're exploring maybe productive, spaces.
Totally. And I know shitcoin sounds pejorative, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the broader point there is the killer insight from that whole wave of projects was if you align incentives and make people feel like equity holders, they'll promote the project.
Yep.
And I think there's a way to do that now with Lightning splits.
Yep. I agree with that. On the kind of Nostr, sort of what makes it take off, or kind of what's the next kind of wave? There's like a meta point in here that I think is worth discussing, which is, there's to do decentralization well is very, very challenging. And, I know people are very principled about it and really want to keep very clean, decentralization principles. And I respect that and appreciate and admire that impetus or that fight. But then I also can see the other side, which is like, well, if the architecture is the right architecture, then, there's all kinds of experimentation that take a point of view that compromise some of the decentralization for some better UX or for some simplicity in onboarding. And I think we don't have enough voices that are kind of exploring those spaces. And, what I mean by that is like, I think we have a lot of, like, it's a worthy fight for decentralization. It's a challenging fight. So I can see why people are like ideologically aligned and pushing in that direction. And I want that future.
Right.
But I don't want us to be held back because we're collectively too ideological about it. So I'd like to see some willingness to, I see some projects that are willing to compromise on some aspects because they show a new way to do something. And I think that's pretty valuable to helping new people get on and new users adopt. And I don't quite see everything just spiraling out of control to become all the same problems that we have in Facebook or Twitter or Google or something.
I'm with you 100%. In fact, I have a ton of respect for, and I think I understand a lot of the projects you mean. Like, I love it. Like, if you want to be opinionated, take a point of view. Like so here's something else that I've come to realize, and one of my actual concerns right now. Decentralization for its own point is never going to be a big selling point. I respect and admire the Richard Stallman type people, and I'm glad they exist, and they help fight for a freer world for everyone. 99% of people are never going to do it. They just aren't, and that's okay. And as long as, if you do a centralized product with a point of view, as long as you give people the ability to eject their keys, great. I want to see tons of those, lots of experimentation. Again, the key thing is at the infrastructure level, they should have the right of exit. As long as they have that, I say by all means, like if centralization and everything else makes a better product experience, go for it. And you should be able to compete and win. And if you compete and you lose, well, something else, someone else will come do it better, which is great. And that's something else I want to just maybe express some thoughts and it's kind of concerns with. Like, I don't think it's the biggest concern, again, because I think it goes in waves. But one thing I have noticed with Nostr, and part of what I loved about Nostr early on is, look, I love Bitcoin. It's great. It's a wonderful tool. But I've kind of like intentionally branded myself not as a Bitcoin fund, but as more of a Lightning fund. And that was very intentional. And the reason is because I'm interested in Bitcoin as a tool and the utility it brings to people. When I see, there's like kind of the like various kind of like cult wings of Bitcoin that take off, and I get why people love it. I do. I love the monetary principles. But if it becomes too much associated with all this other kind of religious fanaticism, it's just going to turn people off. And like I've noticed, even I have to be very careful curating my feed when I show, people that my normal friends who are open to this, they really are open. But all of the kind of like weird Michael Saylor worship and all this stuff, it's just, I'm afraid that if it just becomes that, we're going to turn, like I often tell people, do you want to be right or do you want to win? And I'm super hopeful that we're going to build communities that are completely out of that just don't even mention the word Bitcoin, use it as the beautiful and wonderful freeing tool it is, but for something totally different. And my only fear, besides the Apple thing, which we'll talk about, is if it becomes too cult-like and people just back off because they're just like, I don't want to be part of like this.
Right.
Do you think there's any risk of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking kind of across Bitcoin, Lightning, Nostr.
Yeah, well, because in the early days of Nostr, I feel like Nostr was much more just like open and free. But I'm noticing, at least in my feeds, it's becoming a little bit more Bitcoin circle jerky again, which I don't know. And maybe that's just I need to have a better curated feed. But
yeah, I wouldn't say I've noticed a trend toward more Bitcoin related stuff, but I think there's plenty of it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's, it doesn't seem to be on the rise or on the decline. And generally, I probably follow a lot of people who are into Bitcoin stuff because I find that, interesting discussion.
Yeah. As do I. I mean, I am a Bitcoiner. I love all that, right? But I'm just saying that, I've just been noticing as I try and onboard some of my normal friends, that can be a turnoff point. And I'm sincerely hoping we get tools where it's like, hey, here's new music that was made collaboratively and people got paid.
Right.
It's not, because it's Bitcoin, it's, oh, wow, this is a brand new activity for the world that just like you had a kid in India and a kid in Nigeria and a kid in Mexico collaborate and they all got paid and split that. What? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little impatient.
Well, so yeah, like if you, I mean, I guess to address Mutinous' question, is that the biggest concern that you have around sort of Bitcoin Lightning Nostr adoption, is just that it's too tribal or that it could turn off kind of users who might come for non-ideological reasons?
To be clear, I don't think that's an existential risk. I think it's a short-term setback. I think that, I truly believe, in the kind of Kevin Kelly sense that there are certain technologies that are inevitable. And it doesn't mean that they're, Bitcoin even, although it's extremely unlikely at this point, or Nostr couldn't die and something else similar but better couldn't take its place. It's not impossible, but something like Bitcoin is going to win. Something like Nostr is going to win. Bitcoin, let's say it's 99.8% of the way there. Nostr is 69% of the way there. There are different stages of the journey, but like I do think that, after a decade of this stuff, like, for Bitcoin being energy-backed money, it's the only decentralized cryptocurrency. Like, all these different things. I think Bitcoin is inevitable. I really do. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be working for it. And I think we can speed it up. We can slow it down. I think the tribalism stuff can certainly slow it down and like push back adoption. It's not going to stop it. Like Bitcoin will win. I truly believe that, just because it's just the best money that's ever existed.
Right.
The best payment system on top of it. Full stop. I think Nostr is not at that stage yet. Nostr, I have extremely strong but much earlier conviction on. And it seems like we're headed in that direction, and something like Nostr is going to win. But I truly believe that both of these, all three of this technology stack, Bitcoin Value, Lightning for payments, Nostr for communications, I do think in a decade that's what wins. And I don't think there's many things that can stop. I think turning people off can slow it down. I think that, frankly, the bigger thing, and maybe this is a good segue, is I do think the Apple Store is a much bigger deal than people realize for all, not only of Nostr, but of Lightning payments in general.
So let's talk about that.
Let's talk about it. I think this is a bigger threat than government.
That the Apple Store stuff is bigger threat than government.
Yes.
And that's for Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr.
Correct.
Okay. So
well, for Lightning and Nostr, Bitcoin itself, the big money will find a way to buy it without the App Store. But for Lightning and Nostr adoption, yes.
Right. Okay. So the news, just to make sure we were at least on the same page there, is that I think it was probably a couple of weeks ago while I was traveling. So I don't know the specific date, but I think Damus received a complaint from Apple that Apple said you have to change things or else we're going to take it out of the App Store.
Yeah.
And the things I think were something around paying, like a payment related to associated with a piece of content. So I think if a payment is just being made as a general tip or donation at the profile or account level, Apple says no problem.
Right.
If something feels like it's somewhat associated with a piece of content, so like a tip, a zap on a note, even if the note isn't locked or paywalled.
Well, I think that's the controversy, is that Apple's now saying that is a payment, which kind of sounds like bullshit to me. And like, if you were unlocking it, okay, that seems right. But whatever, I mean, it's their App Store. So yes.
Right. And so they, maybe they are sort of retroactively trying to weasel their existing language to defend their reasoning. Not that they have to defend it. They can do whatever they want, obviously.
I mean, my take on all this, by the way, is like, I don't think, my best guess is that Apple's not being evil or something yet. It could certainly turn that way. They're probably just like, whatever, the lower level reviewers are like, actually, I just realized this, whatever. And it's just not that important to them. Maybe they're just trying to cover their ass. It's not like a very tiny piece of their business is not worth, any potential regulations they see coming. Whatever. There's any number of reasons. I doubt they're trying to kill it. I also, to be clear, on a 10 plus year time horizon, believe Apple's very smart. If Bitcoin and Lightning are inevitable, which I think they are, Apple will, I believe, eventually adopt it and make money on it. Beautiful. Having said all of that, it's a choke point. And I think that, we can get very far with Android. The users are on Android if you look globally, but those users don't have very much money. And so the money is on Apple. The users are on Android. We can do a lot just with Android, but if we want to get the money, real money, and like real revenue opportunities for our businesses flowing there, we do need Apple. And this has been my one kind of like fear for a long time. So to Munis's question, if Apple can just choke all of the Lightning apps, it's a real concern. Now, there are many ways around it. We'll talk about PWAs. I've gone down that rabbit hole, all these different things. But the reality is, I've always found it a very weak point. Some people have talked about, well, we can just fight legal battles. It's like, bro, you're not going to lawyer up against Apple. Right. It's just, and even if you could, that's not the point of technology. Right. Like the whole thesis of something like the sovereign individual is that, violence, as they put it, or certain kinds of technology shapes the logic of how the world works. It's just reality.
Yeah.
And if your technology can't beat them, you're going to lose.
Right.
So what I'm more interested in is like, short term, should there be lawsuits from OpenSats or whoever can fund it? Yeah, that'd be great. Should there be PWAs, which we'll talk more about? Yeah, that'd also be great. But I also wonder, on a long enough time horizon, maybe this sounds crazy, is this action from Apple sowing the seeds of their own defeat? Now, if they're smart, they will adopt Bitcoin eventually, because if that becomes the dominant payment system, they want their cut of that. But what if this is, for the first time opening a window where we say, you know what, Apple's vulnerable. And I know it doesn't seem that way. I know that sounds absolutely crazy right now. This is probably the most well-run company ever. But I don't know. If you look out 30 years, could this be the moment that a truly great entrepreneur, maybe it's already a well-funded public company, maybe it's someone starting from scratch, comes and says, no, I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs, and this is what I'm going after. I think it's an opening.
Yeah, well, I guess you've got to find ways to get some leverage over the ecosystem, and I don't know exactly where that would come from today, but I think one of my favorite thinkers on technology and long-term technology trends is Ben Thompson. Do you read Stratechery?
I don't read it regularly, but
and he has over many years been commenting that he believes that the 30% Apple tax is unsustainable. And he's not like, oh, I have a horse in the race. He's just like, my kind of analysis of the situation is that they're not going to be able to keep this 30% for indefinitely. And I think a lot of his suggestion of pressure comes from the EU or other kind of governments not allowing some sort of antitrust like regulatory stuff that might be coming down. And it may be that he thinks it comes from the EU before the US, but that he just doesn't see it as a sustainable long-term thing. And I don't know that I guess like he's stated it so matter-of-factly that it makes me wonder like, why have I not considered that as like an important part of the game here? Because like it's just an opinion at this point. But I do think like there's some good reasoning to it, being that Apple doesn't want to look like it's being extractive. It wants to look like it's running a profitable business, but not like it's extractive in a monopolistic sense, right? Because that'll run afoul and get all kinds of regulatory problems. But I think also with that, there's like I think PWAs is an example of a technology alternative to the App Store that it's got all its problems in the UX and it's not the habits, and like there's all kinds of reasons that we could say that's not a viable solution, and it may in fact not be. But stuff like that where there's a different way to do things, like PWAs. Another one may be that there are alternative mobile operating systems that or even mobile devices. You see, I think somebody had proposed, why doesn't somebody build a new device or OS, or why doesn't Square build a new device? And I think Jack said like we're looking into it.
So that's what I was referencing.
Okay,
maybe it is Square.
Yeah.
And Square has Apple, execs on their hardware team. So I'm along Square.
Yeah. And I think this would have been hard 10 years ago when the expectations of mobile phone development were kind of breakneck. Like it was always, you needed to be like, Apple or Samsung to really be able to push the frontier of what is possible, and the chips and the batteries and the glass and everything. But now the cameras are an important part. But now it's like most phones are pretty good. You can get really good phones from a bunch of different suppliers, and we're not at like this vertical wall of the curve. We're kind of asymptoting to like things are really good, and like maybe every year things will get a little bit better, but we're not at this, it's not like this Cambrian explosion of new technologies and solutions and UX improvements. I'd say we're kind of like in a more of a iterative, step, kind of incrementalism in mobile phones. Now I think the Apple Vision Pro, which also was just announced, is that more Cambrian explosion type world that may regain some of the kind of control and help Apple assert some of the control that they have in the app stores today. And I don't think the control is obviously fading yet, but I think the mobile phone as an ecosystem platform is kind of hitting an asymptote that is, incrementalism instead of kind of radical innovation, which would suggest that, a new entrant may have a chance.
Yeah. Especially if the new entrant's already a public company, right?
Yeah.
How weird would it be, by the way, if our big ally on the new virtual world becomes Mark Zuckerberg? That'd be so weird.
How would that? I don't even know if I see the steps. What are the steps there?
Well, if Apple basically goes for the closed ecosystem and they're, whatever in their VR goggle world, they're saying no Lightning apps allowed. Yep. Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg's out here open sourcing all their models and claiming he wants the open source ecosystem, sees that's the only way he can go after Apple is to allow, an open technology like Bitcoin Lightning to thrive there.
Right.
I would not have called that a year ago. It wasn't on my bingo card, but maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, Apple, Google, OpenAI are really pushing probably the frontier, and we haven't seen much of it publicly from Apple yet, but I think they're the ones probably pushing the frontier in kind of data and compute in what can be done for AI. And I think Facebook is at a marked disadvantage relative to everybody else, and so they're sort of, their hand is forced to be more open and to publish more of their stuff, which I'm excited about. Obviously, I like open.
It's making strange bedfellows, but could be interesting in alliance.
Yeah. And I think, Facebook is probably kind of striking out, like, meaning Apple Vision Pro is probably so far ahead that kind of the metaverse dream is, probably not going to happen there. And then the other assets all feel like they're, they've seen better, bigger days in the past. So yeah, I think it's like, what is the future of Facebook? Like, what's the rosiest picture future of Facebook? It's probably, radically different than it looks today. And maybe part of that is a big open source.
It'd be freaking weird, but hey, now, and just to be clear, like, I do believe Apple, again, is probably the best company on the planet. Like, I think they will get Bitcoin, and I'm positive. I mean, they were shipping, right, the Bitcoin white paper in the OS. Someone gets it there.
Yeah.
Tim Cook has publicly stated he's like owns some Bitcoin himself, right? So I don't think they're being like super malicious on this yet, and there may be a fight over this, but I do believe when Apple understands that plugging into the Lightning Network will, even if it means compressing their margins, yields them more revenue than not, I think they'll do it. But who knows how long it takes to get there.
Right. I mean, they could also just as easily have a policy that doesn't compress the margins. They could be like, you can make any payment you want. You have to put 30% towards the App Store, and that's just the way you have to do Lightning payments in the apps.
So be it. I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do. Great.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably get there. And I do think, maybe at some point the margins get compressed because you have a third, maybe Square launches a competitor. I don't know, but.
Right. Yeah. So, I guess a lot going on there, but where does that leave us? Like, I think Damus is removing Zaps in the iOS app, right? And then
or at least Zaps at the note level. I think you can still do Zaps at the profile
at the
level.
Note level. Yeah. And then wasn't there's like a Freedom Edition? What is the Freedom Edition? Do you know what that is?
No.
I think there's a Freedom Edition, which there's a bunch of different things going on here. I think there's something of like, maybe in the Mac OS version of it, you can have these kinds of payments, but in iOS you cannot. Would that make sense? Because the Mac App Store may not have the same kind of payment.
It could be. I don't know. I mean, that if so, I would prefer to use it on my Mac anyway. Like, I actually don't like using it on my phone. So. And
then I thought I saw Will teasing some screenshots of a native Mac client. So that
would be great. I would love that.
Maybe that's the Freedom Edition, or maybe there's a couple different things going on here.
I mean, I think all of the above. I think Will is a very good developer, a very smart guy. I'm sure he'll come up with something. It's not going to be as good as what we have today, but it is what it is for now.
Yeah.
But I also do, I like that it's encouraging people to think outside the box. And so maybe just shifting gears a little bit, I do want to at least touch on the PWA thing, the Progressive Web App. So with Progressive Web Apps, to be clear, I had only heard the term before. I've never used them. I've never had any reason to use them. Also, to be fair, I'm not the ideal user here in that I mostly just use the web anyway. I rarely use my phone for anything. I like the web browsers. Like I'm a total boomer on that front. But certain apps have been very useful to me, like Uber, Maps, podcasts, now phone. That's kind of it.
And you can do a lot of that with PWAs, right? Like, people could build great PWAs for that. I think people just don't typically invest in that. And
so I think the only issue, so I just, out of curiosity, I just said yesterday, okay, cool, let's play with some PWAs. What does that look like, that whole process? And, I played with a few of them. In fact, I'll pull them out now. One of them was Stacker News. Kian recently released a Stacker News PWA, including a back button. It's pretty sweet. And, as you can see on my phone here, here are the 3 different ones that I recently broke my screen, but that I put on there. Right? I've got Stacker News, DuckDuckGo, and Apotheca. Stacker News is interesting because I think the only real trick, frankly, with the PWA, I know there's some issues. You can't access the API, so there's like, you don't get notifications and stuff. I don't care. I don't want notifications anyway. I got all that turned off, so that doesn't bother me. Figuring out how to install it and find it. So it's not hard. You just go, on Safari and like you go to the bottom and, around the share button, there's just a place paste to your home screen. Super simple. But if I didn't know that, I know most users don't know that already. And even though it's not hard, that extra friction when your normal behaviors go to the App Store, I think that's the only barrier.
Right.
What I was interested in though, because I think one way to get around that, and Bob actually told me about this, is Apotheca. Have you played with this app?
No.
Okay.
What's Apotheca?
So Apotheca is, I'll show you. It's just this app.
Oh yeah, I opened that up on the tab.
So I think it's apotheca.com, and they basically say, hey, we'll teach you how to install this as a progressive web app, whatever. It's super easy.
Yep.
And then the beauty of it is then once you have Apotheca, it's an app store for other progressive web apps.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a progressive web app. It's an app store for progressive web apps. And I think it'd be interesting to experiment. Maybe you could rebuild this Nostr style as well. And so from that, I went in Apotheca and I was like, okay, well, what are some things I'd like to download? Oh, DuckDuckGo. And I added that. And it's just like one click and now boom, it adds a progressive web app.
And it has like the bookmark on your
it just adds it to your home screen. Yeah.
Nice.
And so it's not like from what I can tell, the only thing it does is it takes away from you having to go to the website, go down to the bottom of the web browser and click add, which is a big friction. And instead you just click add and it adds it to your home screen, which I think is a big deal.
I've also seen apps on the web that show you how to, like they have a little tutorial overlay that shows you how to save this to be used as a progressive web app. Have you seen those?
I haven't, no.
I don't think it's like crazy hard to do. It's just a habit and understanding and expectation thing.
But that habit
is
hard to break when people are used to go to the app store or download. Like if it's like anything else, but if you can make it as an app store, it really is as a PW as simple as one click. I could see that gaining some traction.
I mean, if you get people getting paid for making great TikTok videos, they'll figure out how to install the thing.
Yeah.
Making slicker, smoother install, people will jump through all kinds of crazy hoops to get things that they want.
If the price is big enough,
But I don't think we have the prize yet that's big enough that a typical user will jump through those hoops. And I don't have any doubt that we can have prizes that are big enough.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we have enough, in a sense, experimentation around that, or at least we have a lot of experimentation, but we haven't really hit on what that is yet.
It's a great point. And I think a lot of that comes down to, and I think this kind of goes back to some of my Bitcoiny stuff, some music and stuff that I was looking at in the Nostr feed and in Wave Lake and wherever. A lot of it is very self-referential, which is fine. Like we got to start with the community we have.
Yeah.
But man, I would so love to see people zapping just really good music that has nothing to do with Bitcoin or Nostr. And we're starting to get some of those artists. Wave Lake is starting to onboard some of those artists, which is a great first step.
Right.
And obviously I'm biased because I'm into music and stuff. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's with Pablo and the essays. But I really think that if you can build some community that comes in and, it's not just for Bitcoiners, by Bitcoiners, but it's just good art or good something. And then people say, okay, I want to pay them. And it's as simple as like in Fountain, you can put in a credit card and Bitcoin's happening on the back end. Or, you're a fan of a rap artist and it's just a good rap song. And they say, hey, go to Cash App, we'll teach you how to send Bitcoin.
Right.
But it's something, and maybe we're just not there for the mainstream. I don't know. What do you, I mean? I feel like the tools are probably good enough. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools are probably good enough, but I don't think we have enough focus on the use cases, or we don't have the tools that serve the use cases that are most important. So imagine something. I mean, I've said several times before. I forget if we've talked here, but maybe off the mic. But I think. Porn and gambling are the things that basically built the internet.
Yeah, to tell us more about what you like to hang out or what you're up to over here.
But I mean, because in porn and gambling both have like a strong monetary component to them.
Yeah.
There's regulatory components to them. There's all of the themes that this stuff touches on.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
But we don't have people. I mean, most people don't want to build a new porn or gambling site.
And to be fair, I don't want to fund it. Like I don't,
totally fair. But I think we don't have.
But it will work.
We don't have those tools that would that help the person who got kicked off of Patreon because they said the wrong thing or whatever, who's looking for a home, or maybe they're an OnlyFans person, but they somehow got kicked off.
So I can see one of three things popping there. It could be porn. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen that pop more. It could be gambling. I'm surprised we haven't seen that pop more. In the early days of Bitcoin, you had Satoshi Dice. Four things. Could be drugs. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But number 4, I also think there's a really big opportunity for something digitally native to pop it. That's what I was talking about with machine-to-machine payments and AI.
Yep.
I also think that the stuff that Danny's working on with an ordinals marketplace or digital marketplaces. The other thing I sent him, so I know one of the things we'll talk about is we just mentioned now, the marketplace for kind of AI sexy companions,
right.
NSFW, whatever it was.
Yeah, janitor.ai.
Yeah. I mean, apparently that's popping off. Who knew? Now, that will work. It's not something I'm going to fund, but it will work. But, is there a marketplace for something, and maybe it's outside the US, maybe it's Japan or Korea that pops in first, to just have like a marketplace for AI friends? Mm-hmm. An SOW could be one flavor of that, just like friends, therapists, whatever you want to call it, is another flavor. I think so.
I mean, character AI would be kind of the early stats that came out would be supporting that. You see the stats.
You mentioned, I forgot, like they're big, right?
I think it was 280 million unique visitors, and I think average session length of 28 minutes.
And you said this is not an SFW.
It's a SFW, so it's safe for work. It doesn't allow an SFW.
And it's just like, it's just a friend you chat with.
That's my understanding. Yeah, like, I don't know, you can like chat with Mickey Mouse or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or.
So one question I have
Harry
is
Potter.
like, how do you pay for that?
I don't know that I've used it before and I've not paid it before. So I don't know if like, I've only dabbled with it. I'm not an expert, but I've dropped in, played around, and been like, huh, cool, shrug, okay. But I think, I didn't probably last the whole 28 minutes that is the average session time. But I think like people chatting with characters, is it kids? Is it teens? I don't know. Is it adults looking for companionship? Because I think it's more of these branded IP things, right? Like I think you're chatting with Harry Potter or something.
And so, I've like, look, I'll be real. I have mixed feelings on all this. Like it will work. It kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just a boomer. It kind of makes me sad. It's like, I miss, human to human contact, but I know a lot of people need the digital friends or contact, and like, I don't know, it is what it is, but like imagine, my thinking was Lightning would be better here because if it's costing them a lot on the back end, then, that's not sustainable. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I have no idea. But I could also imagine you're for your friend, like almost like, your Tamagotchi from back in the day.
Yeah.
You want to buy it a present or something like, especially in Asia, I could just see that shit just popping off.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, I guess it's hard to predict the future of which of those is going to pop, but.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it points to though this issue, which I guess I've raised obliquely, but I think you need a story of somebody getting rich doing something.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so, whether they're doing something, they gambled and they won a lot, or they, some content, adult content producer, made a lot, or a kid making a TikTok video made a lot of money. But I think those kinds of stories inspire the next wave of people, and I think the ideology doesn't often inspire the creators. They need some factor in the world that's like either it's a monetary thing, or it's like we got kicked off of that, we're not allowed to do our thing there, but we have great tools to do our thing here.
Yeah, so I almost hope it's more of like, I mean, the kicked off thing, if that happens, whatever. But again, what I don't want is for this to become like a truth kind of network. Right. You want. I hope this becomes. I think you said it before, or someone said this. I think it might have been you, like the new America. Like my dream for Nostr and Bitcoin and Lightning is this is a place where you can come and build your dreams and there is no ceiling. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of message I want to send to people. It's like, you're a kid in Nigeria, you come to Nostr, why can't you make $1 million with your idea?
Yep. And I think those kinds of stories, if we find a few of those things that we can highlight and share, I think those things will drive a lot more people to try a lot more stuff. Like more creativity gets drawn in when they hear about the success stories. It doesn't always have to be monetary,
right?
But I think monetary is an obvious, compelling one with Zaps tied in here. But it could just be like you were able to accomplish something that you haven't been able to accomplish anywhere else, that everybody rallied around. Almost like, remember when was it Cassie that kind of came on and Pablo? It was kind of just a moment that sort of drew a bunch of groundswell, and it was like an interesting story.
Yeah.
That, this person kind of haphazardly showed up, and then Pablo happened to sort of welcome her, and then the whole thing became like a meme. I think those types of things are the things that make it work.
Yeah.
And have, establish a culture and establish habits and norms and expectations and aspirations. And without those things, if it's like, well, we've got these relays and these clients, and you can do tweet like things, it's not enough. It needs those other things. Now, it's great that people are building all the software that helps.
Of course, you need that.
You can't do it without the software, but we can't just rely on great software. We also have to have, these moments, whether it's content or, an area that creates inspiration for people to want to be a part of it and want to say, hey, I can come to the new America and I can homestead and build out a farm, and I can build my future here.
Exactly.
Because it's, it's where the stuff happens.
Right.
So
Nostr America, fuck yeah.
Yeah, as we hear on our
almost 4th of July.
Almost
baby.
the eve of the 4th, yeah. Okay, what we've got our list here. Is there anything, I know we've been sort of skipping around. Anything on the list that comes to mind?
Well, a couple of things I just want to touch on. One are the different approaches to a new app store. So I haven't played as much. I know I listened to that maybe like right before you left for your vacation, the episode you did with Artur on his like Nostr app store thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit more about that because I've seen, it looks like he's got kind of an approach that could turn into an app store. This Ifan guy who I haven't talked to yet, but sounds like he's pushing for an app store kind of idea. What is your take on either of these, or on could something like what Artur is doing or what Ifan's doing here, could that turn into the new app store, like a PWA for PWAs, or maybe it's not even a PWA, it's just in the back end, you never even have to interact with the app store? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like this style of thinking of like, new ways to help these like app-like things emerge. And I've said this in a few different venues, but I'll kind of say it again, is I'm not certain that the definition of what an app is that we all sort of have programmed into our minds is the right layer of abstraction. And what I mean by that is every time a new radical technology comes that reshapes the way we think about computing, you actually build a new set of abstracts.
Yeah.
And we're still saying, oh, Damus is an iOS app and Amethyst is an Android app. And so we're kind of fitting these things into that model. Whereas like if we think of Nostr as the operating system, and then we think of like an app is, an app may just be like a browser of micro apps on that operating system. And then those micro apps get orchestrated in different ways.
Then we may not need the app store.
Yeah. So I almost feel like a compelling way to think about this is to think about like Nostr clients as browsers. Like any part of the iOS code is really just a browser into the Nostr kind of ecosystem. And maybe micro apps are pulled from, maybe the code is pointed to from a relay or hosted on a relay, or maybe it's a bunch of messages on a relay help inform the way to orchestrate a bunch of micro apps. But you kind of have like a new layer where it doesn't matter if you entered via iOS or Android.
Or the web, right?
Yeah, I mean, the web did this to like Windows 95 and Mac OS. It's like roughly irrelevant. As long as you've got a web browser, you can do the stuff you want to do. You can use Google Sheets. Right? It doesn't matter if you're using Google Sheets from a Mac or from a Windows.
But like, just so I understand this, imagine you have whatever is, if you have, can you access Nostr from a web browser like Safari? What I'm trying to get at is if you are still on iOS and you have a web browser, you have some kind of browser to get into the Nostr ecosystem, you still need to have a wallet there that I'm guessing Apple can still kind of restrict some controls on. Unless there is like some other creative solutions we didn't talk about. Someone mentioned this in Nostr, I don't remember who, but you could do like, like a not payment within the app itself. And that not payment, though, keeps a ledger of what's supposed to be. It's like a hacky Rube Goldberg. It's not the right answer.
Right.
But then that sends it to an external server that accesses your wallet via Nostr Wallet Connect or something and makes the payment for you and sends a note back that it's done. Like some way to like get around the payment actually happening from your wallet in Apple.
Right. I think NSEC Bunker.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about that, which was released today.
Was it released today?
Yeah.
So
the new version was at least.
Okay. I saw some announcement, but I don't know the status. I've seen some of the early stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of idea where it's like the stuff is kept and managed in a certain way, and you're just using the thing that we currently think of as an OS to log in to pull the stuff from your bunker.
Yeah. And the wallet's on your bunker too. That's powerful.
Yeah. And then it's not even that hacky feeling, right?
That's a really good point. And like, honestly, and I love this paradigm, whether it's with NSEC Bunker or Umbral, whatever, like, and this whole thing that Breeze and other people have like pulled the keys out from the rest of the application. Like if you can somehow just use the iOS or Android app purely as an interface, almost like you're SSHing into the other thing, then who cares?
And if you've got your NSEC Bunker stored there, it's in a sense, it's kind of like the function. You could imagine a whole ecosystem of kind of like the function of like iCloud, right? Which is like, it's effectively kind of like an iCloud.
Just a key storage,
right? And if you have your key stored there and you have some like thing that happens to run on iOS and Android just the same, and then it helps you enter the super aptum of Nostr with your keys available, And then all this stuff is just, I don't know, is it JavaScript, TypeScript, I don't know what, but it's some component that gets built and orchestrated and presented to you to access all the data that's all out on the relays. But it's not like I downloaded that iOS app to do that thing. It's like I just downloaded that iOS app to like enter Nostr.
Yeah.
I
gotta think more about that, but that feels like a winning approach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just feel like that kind of thing, if we all converge on consensus that that's like a reasonable way to do things, and I'm sure it's like littered with problems, but if the architecture looks something like that, then I think like all these details of like, did I enter from like, what does Apple think about what I did? What does Android think? It kind of doesn't really matter. It's just kind of like the web, and you're not trying to hack, PWAs that don't really manage security of your private keys well. And like those become problems with PWAs. So you sort of get out of all the hackery and just sort of like abstract to a new plane and kind of rebuild this new world.
What do you think would be the best, like from what you understand right now and what tools are available, the best kind of reference implementation of an app like that just all you have is the browser and iOS, you got insect bunker storing the key somewhere else?
Well, I mean, like why can't I do something? I think I was proposing stuff in this general direction. I think Fiat Jeff chimed in and he said, oh, somebody's talking about Keister again, which I guess some hacky prototypey thing of sort of this idea. I don't know. But basically, like, if you have a key store, what should that key store be able to do? Well, I guess like one thing I'd want to do is maybe update my profile. So like you could imagine a little mini profile viewer and updater micro app. And then you could imagine like maybe like a people discovery app that I could like orchestrate in, right? So I have my key stored and I can go to a place. I use Nostr Band this way today, but it's on the web. And so it's not tied to where I manage my NSEC on Damus. But you could imagine that I could do a search and I could find an account and then I could follow that account directly from that experience.
Interesting.
And that's just like a people search and discovery micro app. That's like a different activity that I do. And then I also want to like read a feed of things or read lists of things, and maybe I can orchestrate that one in. But I can kind of compose my own, like, I don't know, the UX and UI of this is highly undefined and uncertain. We don't even have like the language to talk about it yet.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, oh, it's so easy and obvious, we should all just do this.
If anyone else is playing with these ideas, I know Pablo is, Artur to a degree. If anyone else is playing with those ideas, I would love to hear more about it. Like, I'm sure DK would as well.
For sure.
I think this is a very promising set of questions of like, what is the new abstraction layer that doesn't depend on using iOS for payments or anything other than almost like SSHing into your own environment somewhere else.
Yeah, it effectively kind of remotes the process or kind of makes the process separate. It really feels like a new type of web browser.
Exactly.
I mean, I was talking to the Aldi guys the other day about this too.
Oh boy, is there an episode?
Yeah, we haven't published yet, but yeah, we just made it
wait.
a couple days ago. Yeah,
fuck yeah,
that's great. But I mean, they also seem like really well positioned for this kind of thing, but it doesn't really make sense to build the thing until you have at least a few of the things that it would be orchestrating.
Right.
And, I guess you have to come to an agreement around like, what should that look like and what language should it be written in? And is it like a brand new scripting language, or can you sort of just ride along with some of the existing tools that people are already using?
One other thing on the list, you put Nostr script. I don't know anything about that. Is that
I put that?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that on the list. I must have put that a while back.
Okay, never mind. We'll talk about it another time.
I probably started that. Where was that? There was something about Nostr script, wasn't there?
Right there. Yeah, but I
Nostr
plucked
by
that from you.
JB55. I put that in before I went on break, so it's probably a month ago. I have to review what I was thinking of at the time, or what sparked that idea.
Cool. I guess one other thing I just want to touch on is we didn't talk so much about the open source AI stuff, but I do want to just maybe highlight, if anyone's interested in this stuff, check out my paper, hivemind.vc/AI. I try and lay out my thesis very clearly. The three areas that I'm very interested in, that I'm looking for more exploration here, and I think this could also be very symbiotic with Nostr. Thing number one, I'm just being like very prescriptive at this point of stuff I'd like to see built.
Yeah.
I would like to see a marketplace for GPUs, a Nostr backend marketplace for GPUs. Anyone can list their cycles and they can charge in sats. And it could be for sort of like more generic. It could be for specific models they want to run. I don't know. I will extend that right now to say I would like to see a Nostr-based backend for AI agents, open source AI agents. I want to see a thriving marketplace for different agents that can do different things. And ideally, they can do different things together, maybe using LangChain and Lightning Labs L42 protocol.
Right.
So those are two kinds of marketplaces I want to see. Number two, I'm very interested in this idea that, and by the way, I also think there's something probably can be done with Nostr and Lightning payments to string together lots of compute for training as well. I think that's more complicated. I talk about it a little bit in the article, but maybe hosting's a lot easier to start with, you know? But I am interested in the training stuff as well. Number two, I would love to see someone start training or at least fine-tuning models on Nostr's trust-weighted data set. Maybe this is going to be Artur, maybe someone else. But I think that one of my big insights in going deeper in AI recently is, garbage in, garbage out. If you train on the web and the web is like 30, 40, 60%, whatever junk,
Right.
then it's probably going to be shit.
Right.
And so we're not there yet, but I think this primitive, going back to my essay from last summer, how to start Google searches, you can associate information with value. That's a very powerful primitive in training better, higher quality, less hallucinating prone models. I would love to see someone train an AI chatbot on Nostr.
Right.
Or fine tune it, whatever. Maybe we don't have enough data yet, but I want to, but with the open weights as well, and they can even publish the weights, right? And that's related to who's apt to the trust strength thing.
Yep.
Number three, I would also love to see exploration, and I don't know exactly what I want to see here yet, but I know there's very fertile ground. Exploration in how do you bank the AI? So basically building off those two initial small libraries that Roast Beef published and figuring out, working with whatever the popular agent frameworks are. I think LangChain is the big one right now. What opportunities are there for banking those AIs? Okay, so you figure out how to give them their Lightning accounts. What else can be built around that? Are there services like, I don't know, like loans to the AIs or like whatever? Like I don't know, but I think there's something very fruitful and potentially fertile there.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. When you mentioned loans to the AIs, that makes me wonder a bit about sort of the model for how you would do. I love this future that you're imagining of AIs, that can be trained and inference run in kind of decentralized ways with just like an API call with some payment. I think it's a beautiful future, but I think like one of the challenges is the time and sort of like who invests the CapEx and when do they expect to get the return. So like the training has to happen ahead of time, and inference is very expensive, but depends on trained models. And so you sort of need to couple them in some ways. And there's like, you do the training today and you get the inference tomorrow, and does a loan bridge that gap? And sort of that whole ecosystem, it feels like there's a lot of, like time shifting. Not everything is so transactional. There's actually transactions, but people do work ahead of time with the hope that when you want to make the transaction, you can get paid. And so bridging those could be loans. And I wonder if there's actually loan type I don't know if is loan even the right way to think about it, or is there some other?
Yeah, some kind of like, maybe it's a new financing instrument.
Right.
Maybe you're buying cash flows from that agent or from that model in the future. And like whenever that model gets called, there's always some cash flow that flows back to that person. Sounds a lot like equity.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe it's almost like a micronized robotic bot riff on what G is doing with Nostr. It's like a more, instead of the 6-hour time chunk, it's like the API transaction time chunk or something.
There's a lot of fertile ground, and I'm not saying that's going to be the first one. Like that sounds obviously complex. There's a lot to build out, but like a marketplace for GPUs or a marketplace where anyone can run a model and say, pay me in sats, like that could happen right now.
Yep.
Marketplace for trained agents that do very specific things that get paid in sats, that can happen right now.
Yep.
So like if I were just a hacker experimenting, those are probably the two things I'd start with.
Yep. Yep. Cool. Request for projects, baby. Request for projects. I like it. Cool.
Anything else on your mind?
What else? I've been spending a bunch of time in some circles with people, playing with a lot of the AI projects too. So I think when you talk about sort of the way that as a kind of a bunch of breakthroughs, new habits and activities that can be coupled with Nostr and coupled with kind of Bitcoin Lightning, that all seems like I'm on board with that. That feels like the future that we're going to see soon here. I'm surprised by how kind of distinct the communities are. Like, I think Nostr people often, are aware of some AI topics, but at a pretty high level, not necessarily in the in the weeds. And then a lot of the AI people are not so aware. Maybe they know that decentralization projects exist, but they
know what
really
Bitcoin is.
Yeah, they know what Bitcoin is, but they're not really super aware of the details. And I think we probably lack people who have enough depth in each to be able to help bridge that and help kind of the best ideas flow back and forth. So glad to hear that you're starting to play that role and getting people together. So that's
shout out to Cody. He's doing a lot. Cody Lowe at Fetty. He's really pushing this ball as well.
Yeah. That's on my mind. Cause in a lot of the stuff, like we do in San Francisco, we host those shows. And I've got to say, geez, it almost feels like 80% of all kind of those types of, kind of traditional startups have some pretty important AI component to them.
And is it a hype cycle? Of course.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it won't yield really big winners also, right? And so one thing that I've been telling more people is that I know there's been this narrative, which I'm in many ways, a lot of my thinking is, it's funny, it's kind of left me as like sort of an outsider in a lot of ways. Like, among my Silicon Valley friends that all went crypto, they're like, oh, there's the Bitcoin guy. Among my Bitcoin friends, I'm like, well, actually, no, I think, I have this position that, I think the boom's going to happen here again in San Francisco. And I know that's kind of antithetical to a lot of this. I'm not saying cool stuff won't be built everywhere. I invest internationally. It can be built anywhere.
Yeah.
But like, I truly believe, we're seeing 50 plus AI events a week happening in SF right now. The kids are sleeping on floors again. The smartest people in the world are here. I want to do what I can, and hopefully we can do some of this together.
Yeah.
But like, the idea that I'm trying to get across to Bitcoiners and Lightning people is like, the AI thing is happening now. It's real. People are tripping over themselves to fund this stuff. The smartest people in the world are hacking on it. And the shitcoiners haven't taken over for whatever reason.
Right.
There's a window.
Right.
You want Bitcoin to win? This is it.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop. You orange pill the AI kids, we win.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way you actually do it is not necessarily by convincing, but just by
showing it works.
Being available with the stuff when the use cases emerge.
Yeah.
Being able to show them that it works.
And having reference implementations of and this was going back to my point earlier. It's not about getting them to join the cult. That will not work.
Yeah.
What will work is saying, you want to be able to sell your service to a kid in India.
Yep.
And they can't pay right now. Here's a way.
Yep. I want to see that kid in India build the service, make $1 million.
Maybe it'll be a kid in the Himalayas that you met.
Maybe in the Himalayas.
Maybe they'll sell a K-pop service.
Love it. Could happen. Well, if it happens, we will be reporting on it here on Nostr News.
You always hear it here first, baby. You hear something.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by. This was super fun.
Likewise.